Hello and welcome back to New Paradigm Healing. This series focuses on ayahuasca-assisted therapy. Our intention is to educate, inform, and support the conscious and responsible use of ayahuasca in the Western context. If you want to know more about ayahuasca-assisted therapy and our upcoming trainings and workshops, sign up for our mailing list to be the first one to know about the latest news at avatarhealingarts.com. Welcome to all of the audience, all of our listeners. This is Nina with Ayahuasca Assisted Therapy. And I'm super excited today to have a guest, Carlos Tanner, who is the founder of the Ayahuasca Foundation. And I don't know him yet. So this is like our first time of having a conversation as well. But we met through a Clubhouse, like I heard him talk in a room that we were together, and I really resonated with his energy and the message that he was bringing through. So I'm just excited to share this space, and especially because I think it's so important that healers who are working with the integration process have contacts with centers and retreat centers, and we all kind of, cooperating and helping each other and serving people together. So I'm very excited. Thank you, Tanner. Thank you, Carlos, for being here today. Welcome. And I'm gonna just give you a chance to introduce yourself and tell a little bit more about like who you are, how did you come across, working with this beautiful plant, and how did it change your life, and what is that you are doing right now?
All right. I'll try to keep that short. Thanks so much for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be a guest on this and to get a chance to talk with you, as well as to talk about my own thoughts and ideas. My name is Carlos Tanner. I was born in the United States, and how I found the medicine. My first introduction to the idea of ayahuasca was through Michael Harner's book, The Way of the Shaman. Unfortunately, he took that chapter out of recent publishings, but in the early publications, it did start with a chapter about his introduction to shamanism, which was through ayahuasca. And that's really how I learned about it. Then I read at the same time, which would have been my teenage years, Carlos Castaneda, and got interested in that, and that would then lead to reading the book Food of the Gods, and then getting into Terence McKenna. And so all of those pieces were very important, I guess, influences for me that rose my curiosity about ayahuasca. And then I had the chance to try ayahuasca in Massachusetts, where I'm from, with someone who claimed to be from the Santo Daime Church. I really hope that he wasn't from the Santo Daime Church, to be totally honest, because it was totally unorganized and pretty pathetic in a way, but it was ayahuasca. At that point, I kind of came to a realization that I probably already knew that this wasn't the way I wanted to experience it. And so I would make a vow, I guess, that I wanted one day to go to the Amazon rainforest. And along the way in my life, I got a career and started adulthood, I guess you could say, graduated from college and got a job that I thought I would have for the rest of my life, because that's what we're conditioned to think that a career means. And then I became quite miserable. My career, I felt, was really stifling, but the conditioning was so strong that I felt that it was just a part of what it meant to be an adult. You just give up on your connection to nature and mystery, and you just start, making money and getting stuff. And I wasn't satisfied by that, but I accepted it as my reality. So to cope with the lack of satisfaction, I turned to heavier drugs, painkillers, opiates, and wound up with a pretty severe opiate addiction. And so I was, using heroin sometimes before work, on my way to work, and certainly after. And it was kind of causing a downward spiral. It was definitely causing a very downward spiral in my life that culminated in me waking up in my car underwater because I had blacked out behind the wheel driving home from a bar. where I had been taking drugs and drinking, and I drove my car into a river. I luckily was able to swim to shore, save my life, and watch my car like sink completely underwater, having no idea how I got there. And at that point, I had hit rock bottom, and I made a real declaration to myself and to the universe that I would do something drastic to change the course of my life and to really save it. I knew that I was using opiates, at least on some level of my consciousness, to numb the feeling or awareness that I wasn't following my path anymore. And so part of that declaration was really to like get back onto the path that I felt was really meant for me in this life. A couple of days later, I got a random email from someone who was in Iquitos, Peru, an old friend I hadn't spoken to in a long time. She happened to be traveling through Iquitos right at that time and had found two guys from Russia that said they were working with a real shaman. She remembered when I had told her about my ayahuasca experience and how I wanted to go to the Amazon one day to drink ayahuasca with a real shaman. And so she thought to write to me. The timing was such that I didn't see it as a coincidence. I really saw it as the response of the universe to my declaration that I wanted to make a drastic change and get back onto the true path of my life. So when I accepted her offer and bought my plane tickets and flew down to the Amazon rainforest, it wasn't to try ayahuasca. It was really to fulfill my destiny. I knew that it was going to be a radical transformation in my life that would bring me back in alignment with my path and my calling as a human being in this life. So that was an important setup. You know, I knew that that would be the outcome. I felt it, and that was the outcome. I did make a massive transformation where I found the roots of traumas that were at the true cause of my addiction, as well as a lot of other problems in my life, probably all of them, and was able to resolve that trauma in the most remarkable and amazing way, as well as to understand and treat physical problems that I'd been dealing with for years that doctors couldn't diagnose. And it was all just so absolutely fascinating. And in the third ceremony, the curandero Don Juan told me it was my path to be a healer, and he invited me to be his apprentice. I accepted his offer, and that was in May of 2003. In 2004, January 4th, I flew back to Iquitos, Peru, having wrapped up all the loose ends of my life in the United States, and said goodbye and started a whole new life as a curandero's apprentice in the Amazon rainforest. I moved in with Don Juan and his family, and I lived with him for 4 years. At the end of that, I came up with the concept for the Ayahuasca Foundation, and in 2009 started this nonprofit organization based out of Iquitos, Peru. Started working with a Shipibo curandero named Don Enrique. Eventually his wife as well and his two brothers all joined together on our team. And to this day, I still work with that family, the Lopez family, and we work within the Lopez Mahua tradition, offering educational courses like the one that your guest Dean did and how I met him, and also healing retreats. And more recently, in 2017, we opened the Riospo Research and Retreat Center, where we started hosting research funded by the British Medical Research Council. And that research was recently published in the journal Frontiers in Psychiatry that showed some really jaw-dropping results, especially with regard to epigenetics. It was the first ever epigenetic study on a psychedelic, and it showed that there was a permanent change to genetic expression as a result of doing an ayahuasca retreat, specifically with a genetic marker associated with depression. So that suggests that there could be a cure for depression through the use of ayahuasca plant medicine traditions. And we're going to be exploring that further in our stage 2 study that's currently underway.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for sharing all of this. I made so many notes. It's wow, such a juicy story. I have so many questions. And yeah, first of all, thank you for sharing your story and just, you know, being vulnerable. And I think it's so important that people, you know, see where, you know, the healers are coming from, and also the integrity of the people and the healers, I think it's very important that we are transparent about, our story and how, we find our way to this medicine, and through the medicine, we're called into kind of like a higher service. So thank you for, sharing your story with everybody who is listening right now. And well, I would like to start with, just referring to some of the points that you made, this this kind of existential anxiety or disease that a lot of people experience, especially who end up working with this medicine or any kind of other transformational tool, of this kind of inner division within us, that the conditioning that you were talking about, that tells us what we should do and how we should live. And then there is that kind of inner voice or true voice or higher self, or whatever people want to call it, that is, calling you to the direction, to your dreams and destiny. And I think that this is something I just wanted to point out, because I believe a lot of people can connect to this, especially now at this time, in the planet, all around the world, that, that this feeling of dis-ease, in a way of not being at ease with how our life is and what we are doing, and knowing somehow deep in our soul, in our hearts, that this is not the right path, this is not the right thing to do, but somehow, maybe not even seeing another path or another alternative of what I would do if not this. So I can really relate to that. And a lot of times what happens is, as you mentioned in your story, that you come into like a rock bottom or dark night of the soul, or breakdown, breakthrough, whatever people want to call it, like a wake-up call, when something happens, when you really become aware that you have to choose, that you have a choice and you have to choose, how you want to live your life, really. And then I think that is the moment which is the start of the journey for me, when you make that choice, even before you sit in a ceremony or you actually come with the medicine. But when you make that inner choice and that inner commitment that you're going to honor yourself and follow yourself, and follow that voice and that knowing and that calling that you are feeling. And I think that's where I count, like if there is a beginning, of course, everything is just going on all the time, but it's really, the beginning of the journey. And then, as you said, that there is a perfect timing. If the medicine comes to your experience or calls you, as you said, many people experience, the medicine. I certainly had a lot of opportunities, but I felt very strongly that I want to go to the source. I want to go to the jungle. I want to go to Peru, and that I need to honor that calling. So there is a perfect timing, when you're ready, when everything is ready. And I think that involves already an element of trust, to know that and to surrender to that. And obviously, what you said, your intention, I always talk about this with people in the preparation part, that your intention is just so important. What you put out, what you call in, as you said, that you called in that you want to change your life and you want to step into your destiny and your higher service, and you intentionally call this in and declare this to the universe and align yourself with this. I think this is very important for people to understand, that will shape your whole experience, on this path, because you're going to attract people, places, events that are aligned with that intention and with that vibration, the same way as you found this beautiful family and these lineages and these places that you were put in touch with. So oftentimes when people don't have a strong or clear intention, or don't have intentions at all, they can end up maybe in people, places, events that not necessarily, the highest vibrational or the most, aligned, in many ways. So I wanted to just refer back to that. And definitely, what you said about the radical transformation, I love radical transformation. That's definitely what's happening. And I think this is beautiful, but also it is so intense. And I really resonated with what you shared, that the medicine helped you and guided you to go to the root of the problem, the root of the disease, the core of the trauma, whatever it was that caused the imbalance, the fragmentation, the misalignment, and becoming aware of it, obviously having a choice to transform it, to heal it, to let it go. And that, you know, results in an incredible healing and transformation on every level, just as you mentioned, you know, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. And oftentimes I feel that we have these strong stories with the medicine. I shared my story, you know, many times on this podcast, because you know, this is almost like a catalyst and an inspiration then to be naturally in service, because you had this experience and you, I think it's a natural urge, you know, to want to help people, you know, to as you help yourself and as you were guided and helped, and to share this gift of healing and freedom and empowerment, what we received, you know, through this journey with this particular medicine. And I also love, you know, thank you for your work and for your service with the foundation and laying, you know, grounds of certain structures that we need to create in the West, because we don't have this, because we don't have understanding or culture history with this particular plant. So I think it's so important what you do to create these bridges, you know, between the two cultures and the two worlds, like a two worlds of like, you know, worldview or understanding, and to help people to merge it, not to choose or to judge or to think that it's better or worse, but to really synthesize and integrate, you know. Certainly my experience also with the medicine and my healing was that it gave me that higher view, that spiritual higher perspective or bigger perspective, whatever you want to call it, that helped me, you know, to see things in a different way, and therefore to change and heal. And you know, this is certainly one of the gifts that people can find, you know, if they work with this medicine. So my question is, I would like to ask first about the healing retreat. So what is the kind of format, that what kind of clients you are working with, or is there any kind of requirement? What is the format you do? Tell me a little bit more about it. How can people reach you? What are, you know, what is the preparation, you know, that you are including in this?
Mhm. Yeah, we offer retreats that range from 10-day retreat, 18-day retreat, 4-week empowerment course, and 8-week initiation course. So I do call the first 2 retreats and the second 2 courses, to distinguish that there are a lot more educational elements in the latter and much more focus on the treatment in the former. So the first 2 programs, the 10-day retreat, which is the retreat that we have starting in about 2 weeks. It's the shortest retreat. It includes 5 ayahuasca ceremonies led by the curandero Don Rono Lopez, who's Shipibo. And so we follow the Shipibo plant medicine treatment. The rundown, I guess, for the 10-day and the 18-day would be an expanded version of that with a couple more treatments included that aren't on the 10-day. But the 10-day retreat would start by getting to the center, getting settled in, and then having a first ceremony that night that we refer to as our diagnostic ceremony, in the tradition with the Shipibo, or at the very least with the Lopez family tradition. If you were to go to receive treatment, just like going to see your doctor, there would need to be tests done. There would need to be, you know, an analysis to figure out what the proper diagnosis was that would lead to the proper prognosis or treatment plan. So that's what the first ceremony is, and we do that right away on the first night. The next day starts the treatment, and there's a general treatment plan that everyone is encouraged to follow. But then there were personalized treatments on top of that. So our treatment plan starts with a digestive cleanse using a purgative called Sangre de Grado, which is like it's kind of like a gritty hand cleanser that mechanics might use or something, but you're going to use it, or the participants use it for their cleansing of their stomach, which allows them to absorb their food better, to absorb nutrients better, and also to help to treat certain nicks and cuts that might be in stomach lining, ulcers, acid reflux, things of that nature, to essentially start a reset on the gut biome, so that it can be rebuilt and create a new baseline that is neither, acidic or too alkaline, but just like right what the body wants it to be. And so all throughout the 10-day diet, a very, very careful diet of food is provided that is non-stimulant, so that it doesn't create any imbalances as this new baseline is set with the gut biome. And that also cleanses the digestive system, and that starts the whole process. Our immune system is founded in our digestive system as well. And so then that day you'd have a personalized treatment to go over what you might need. A consultation to go over what you might need in personal treatment with the curandero. And then you'd start your daily remedies that day, and you take those every day. So there's 3 daily remedies. One that is based on the plant Pinon Colorado, which is a circulation cleanser, or really circulation enhancer. It increases circulation and oxygenation to the cells. And then the second one is an anti-inflammatory based on turmeric. And the third is based on what we call the sensitive plant, but in Shipibo it's called Tantirao, which increases sensitivity. So those are medicines that people take orally, liquids that they drink 3 times a day, every day throughout the retreat. And then vapor baths, they're the first treatment as well, or one of the first treatments. Vapor baths are detoxing. They open up the pores, you sweat out your toxins. You also breathe in the medicinal plants that are boiled along with the water to create the vapor in the vapor baths. And that is the beginning phase of treatment, I guess you could say, which is really the detox, the cleansing phase. That's coinciding with the ceremony. So by the time you get to the second ceremony, and ceremonies are every other day, so there are 5 ceremonies over the 10 days, the 1st, 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 9th days or nights. And when you go to your second ceremony, you've already done, like 9 different treatments, or at least taken doses of at least 5 different treatments. And that contributes greatly to your experience in the ceremonies. There's also a respiratory system cleanse with a plant called Mukura, a central nervous system cleanse with a plant called Chiricsanango, and then smoke baths in the middle of the retreat serve as a protection for the detoxing, the cleansing that took place. And then the second half, or the end of the retreat, is with cold water baths, or water that is not boiled, but just soaked with plant medicines. And that is to add positive energy. So you can kind of look at it like you remove negativity, then you protect yourself, and then you add positivity or positive energies. And then, there's throughout the retreat there, we use complementary practices like yoga, meditation, breath work, massage, and counseling. And those are contributed by our facilitation staff, who are also apprentices in the tradition. And that's the like a sum up of our 10-day retreat. Our 18-day retreat goes deeper than that. So we include a second purgative for the digestive system that also cleanses the lower digestive system as well as the blood with a plant called Ohe. And we use a stronger respiratory cleanse in addition to the Mukura later on with a plant called Sachamango. So it just takes the same principles of cleansing and same treatment of the various systems of the body to a deeper level with the 18-day retreat. And then the empowerment course is essentially like a 2-week retreat and a 2-week course combined into one. And the 8-week course is specifically for people that feel a call to the medicine, that feel like it is their path as well, to provide them with the basic principles of ideology and methodology within the Shipibo tradition, so that they have right understanding and right practice as they embark on what is a lifelong journey.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, because I think many people just from the West cannot imagine, what a retail or a retreat entails. And I know that it's very different at different places. So thank you for sharing what is happening at your place. And yeah, I was trained with in the Shipibo lineage as well, with the Shipibos. And anyway, I'm sharing my experience. It is a pretty intense experience. As you described, there is that not just dieting the ayahuasca, but dieting different medicinal plants at the same time, being in a very restricted diet. And also having other types of additional treatments and sessions, between the ceremonies. So thank you for pointing this out to people. Again, as we are talking about specific settings, as not all retreats are like that, but definitely this is a Shipibo style, a deeper, very intense experience. Especially I feel if somebody coming from the West, from a completely different way of healing and medicine and so on and so forth. So my question would be that, do you screen people in any way? How do you screen people? And do you have any contraindications when you turn somebody away and you say, maybe this is not the best for you right now in this moment?
Yeah, to register for one of our retreats, you do have to fill out what I consider to be a pretty lengthy form. We do ask for a lot of health details, mental health details, as well as physical health details. I will say that there are a few red flags, but really not that many. I really don't want to turn anyone away. That being said, I have turned people away. I have, made recommendations. And so when a person registers, I review their registration form. And on a few occasions, I have seen those red flags, which would be specifically schizophrenia or types of psychosis. If it's something like borderline personality disorder or bipolar, I will usually try to set up further communication, have a conversation, because unfortunately with mental health, a lot of those diagnoses are not, testable. You don't get diagnosed bipolar because of a blood test, for example. It's really kind of a judgment call on the individual that makes the diagnosis. And so, I'm open. I want to stay as open as possible that perhaps that diagnosis isn't the most accurate. And perhaps, especially with bipolar, for example, like bipolar, if you caught anybody at the wrong time in their life, they could probably end up with a bipolar diagnosis. I'm sure that if you had found me at the wrong time in my life, I could have ended up with a bipolar diagnosis. We literally are like bipolar. We have two poles. Like that's kind of a scientific fact. So, it's almost like I'd be worried if you weren't bipolar. It's really a spectrum, and like so many, and everything within the mental health field is really on a spectrum. I want to add a couple things that I think tied in, if it's okay, with what you were saying originally, and then what I was talking about secondarily. I described what happens when you get to Peru, and that's certainly the retreat. That's the most common perception is the retreat. But to me, the retreat, like on that spectrum idea, spreads farther out in a timeline that really starts with the registration. Because at the moment of registration is the commitment. There is a decision that sets in motion an entire chain of events that are physiological, emotional, mental, and spiritual within your own personal life. And it's very, very common to hear that once a person registers for a retreat, a lot of shit starts coming up for them, before there's any travel plans or any, before any concept of arriving at the Amazon rainforest comes into play. And so that really is the beginning of the retreat. And so I offer counseling sessions before participants arrive to Peru to help guide that part of the retreat. And I really specifically shape the timeline that way. So I actually suggest to them hey, let's choose this date as the retreat date. And let's say this is part one of the retreat. And part 2 of the retreat, it will actually take place in Peru. And then part 3 of the retreat will be when you return home. And let's change the timeline so that we look at this healing process accurately, which is that there's a true preparation and there's a true healing process that is at work in that pre-Peru part of the retreat. And then the participation part of the retreat is the part that you're actually in Peru, ingesting the plant medicines, working directly with the Shipibo plant medicine tradition and the curanderos themselves. And then there's that super important integration section of the retreat. And so to think that like it's not starting yet just because you haven't gotten on a plane or haven't arrived at the center, I think would be inaccurate and detrimental, or at least would you'd miss out on potential benefit to think about it that way. And then also to think that it's over when you leave the retreat center or get on the plane and get back home, I think would also cause you to miss out on some really important benefit that would come from the continuation and the integration process. That's really a necessary step to solidify that transformative experience into your lifestyle and the influences that would continue your decision-making processes as you move forward. So I just wanted to point that out. And I think that alludes to when you were talking about the journey and when it starts. I totally understand. Like I would say that my journey started when I went to Peru. But I also know, and I even spoke about like, well, I found that book, Way of the Shaman. Why did I want to read Way of the Shaman? Why did I want to read the Castaneda books? Why did I love Terence McKenna so much? A lot of other people didn't. Like I know a lot of people that weren't interested in that. And so clearly, like my journey started, like you kind of said, like there was no real beginning to it. And in a way, I kind of think that those are great connections to think about, like, yeah, I had my Peru retreat, like I had my trip to Peru where I say that my journey began or my transformation took place. But in reality, I had set in motion an entire series of chain events that were all connected, including my heroin addiction and including my life spiraling out and including my decision to have a career and the conditioning that I thought I was listening to, but struggling with. Like all of that were all key components. Had I not woken up in my car underwater as a result of being so spiraled out of control in my drug addiction, I don't think I would have ended up in the Peruvian Amazon. So like, thanks so much to my heroin addiction, I found myself following a path that is so truly fulfilling for me. And I hope that maybe can be helpful, because I don't want it to be a situation for anyone that might be watching or listening to this that like, oh, why can't I find my path kind of situation. Like you are on your path. I guarantee it. You are definitely on your path. It might be the part of the path where you're like still getting to the mountain that you're going to climb, but that's part of it too. You don't just show up magically at the mountain that you're going to climb. People that climb Mount Everest, there's this massive story that they all tell of how they actually got to the foot of the mountain, even though the meat of the story, the juicy part, is the climb itself. The reality is that there's always this lengthy path that gets us there. And no matter where you are in your life or how you feel, you're on your path. It just hasn't gotten to the part that you want to write about or tell the story about, but you'll include it later.
I so agree with that, totally resonate with that. And I think, it's totally a life is a connected chain of events, and it all makes sense, in retrospect, more than sometimes, being in the present moment. But as specifically, we were talking that with this medicine, if there is a beginning of the journey is when you say yes to the calling of this medicine, when you sign the registration to the retreat, or with my clients when they sign the agreement for my program, and when, or even before they sign, when they have that internal yes, that I would say could be, if people, people like to get points and endings and beginnings, if that could be a point to point out to people and to really emphasize what you said, that there is a preparation process. So it's not an event. The ceremony is not an event. This is a journey, and there is a preparation. And the ceremony I call the initiation part, and then the integration, which is the embodiment. And actually, I do in my program 3 months prep with the people, because exactly, what you're saying, because once you say yes, there is a pre-purge that's happening, so the pre-sessions that I have with people help them to move through those fears and things that are arising, help it creates a space to educate themselves of the journey in general, to explain to them that things will get worse before they get better, so on and so forth. So when they are in the intensity, there is more relaxation and surrender. So I do quite a bit of work, then also helping people to clarify their intention. Why are you doing this? What is that you're looking for? What is, because sometimes people don't even know, as you said, I don't like this, I don't want this, but I don't know what I want, I'm confused. So there is definitely, it's very crucial that people understand that it's not just a physical preparation, which is the 1 or 2 weeks of physical detox or restricted diet, but there is a mental, emotional, spiritual preparation, and you are going into a sacred ceremony. So I always tell to people, you wanna present yourself, in a way, in your best way, that you cannot just coming from the street without, any thought about it. But it's really, it's also honoring yourself, honoring your journey, honoring your experience, that you are committed and you take this seriously. And also you understand that it's not an event that, and it's not a magic pill that suddenly will change everything. And in the integration, as you said, that's where I feel a lot, or maybe I can say I feel the most of the healing happens there, because even though we are able to shift things instantaneously, in energetic realms, it still takes place physically in the material, physical world to go through a healing. And I feel that if I would have released, all the pain and the trauma that I went through processing in my integration all at once, one event, probably I would have gone crazy. You know what I mean? Probably I would have not been able to handle the amount, like mentally, emotionally, even my physical body. So I believe that there is an intelligence, a conscious intelligence that is guiding that integration process, and pacing it out for you to know it, to bring those pieces back, because it is very intense, and we need these moments of sit with something and breathe into some moments, and all the damage that we carry and all the pain that was created for a long time, and passed down. So it will take some time to unravel it. And I think that's also super important for people to understand, that this is something that you actively participate in, and not something that happens to you or somebody is doing it to you. This is a participatory process. And as you said, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to heal, to set yourself free, to experience more joy, to open your heart, to come back into your wholeness, into your alignment, into your true self, whatever you wanna say. And in my program, I have 1 year of integration with people when we do a circle through the medicine wheel. And the way I do it, that first they get personal sessions like every week, and then every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, and then once. So there is a kind of, as people stabilize and ground in their new awareness and practice, those new behaviors and solidify them, they will need less and less support, and that's the goal of the integration, that they learn to navigate and hold space for themselves and handle, whatever. So so good that you are talking about it. I would like to ask, just with the preparation and the screening, yeah, just obviously schizophrenia and mental psychosis would be a contraindication, as you said. I would like to ask the three specific questions. Do you have any age minimum requirement with the youngest person that you can receive? Is pregnancy contraindicated? What about if somebody is pregnant? And what about if somebody is medication, especially on SSRIs like serotonin blockers?
Right. We do have an age limit. It's 18 years old. That's basically just for legal reasons. We are, operating in another country where almost entirely our guests are traveling out from countries outside of Peru. And, just to have cross international borders and to make a decision like that. So we have the minimum age is 18. We don't have an age requirement at the other end. I think 80 is the 80, or maybe someone over 80 has attended, but definitely someone 80 attended. With regard to pregnancy, I've never had a person who was pregnant like apply or register for a program. I would probably want to have a conversation with them about it. It's not it's such a personal thing that it would really come down to the specifics of that particular person or each particular person. I don't have a general prohibition against it. I've drank ayahuasca with pregnant people before, but not retreat participants. So I would guess if I were to say generally, I would say it is safe, but there's a lot of details that could make it potentially unsafe, which I would want to like flesh out and through discussion. And in terms of SSRIs, yeah, that we insist that no one be taking any antidepressant medication. We actually like go full on just requesting that no medication be taken. There are, very few exceptions.
How long before the retreat they have to come off of all medication?
We say 2 weeks, but I say the longer the better. There are certain medications where I'll have a conversation and say that it can be shorter. I've done a lot of research into pharmaceutical medications as a result of that, so I get to know like a lot of medications. Even with the antidepressant medications, there is like a wide variety of antidepressant medications, some of which. So with antidepressant medication, we do say 4 weeks, but there are some that I know you could take up to 2 weeks. Prozac, however, is a great example of one that you definitely don't want to take within 4 weeks of drinking ayahuasca. All of those, there are like generalities, but I always will follow up, and as long as everyone's fine with it, then there's no issue. But sometimes people will contact me and say, well, I really think I need this one, or is there any way I could take it, up closer to when the retreat begins? And then I'll do some research to try to figure it out and come up with like the best plan for each person if they feel like it's a requirement or would help them. Ultimately, I focus a lot more on people's headspace or where they're at on the consciousness level emotionally. So, that's certainly a component of it. If someone is like racked with anxiety and they could take medication that they have been taking that would help to ease their anxiety, could I have some leeway? And sometimes those anti-anxiety medications flush out of the system completely in less time. And so, it's always like a balance per person. And the same with the preparation diet, actually. I was just talking with someone that seemed to have a real strong dependency to coffee. And, it seemed like cutting out coffee in their preparation was going to cause them a lot of suffering, at least the way they described it. So that was an interesting conversation
relate to that.
to talk with them about, what it means to have a healthy relationship and understanding dependency, and then weighing out, what you're willing to give up to achieve your goals. And, are you willing to make those types of sacrifices for the benefit of achieving your goals and intentions? And then also, like, I don't want someone to come with a negative attitude because of what they've been through in their preparation. I don't want someone to show up and like basically be mad at me or mad at our organization or mad at ayahuasca because they like blame me for like forcing them to give up things that were helping them feel more balanced or more pleasure even. And so, it's kind of this personalized, unique search for each person. Sometimes people are just totally fine and they get it, but I guess I focus more on consciousness than I do on the physical elements of it, with the very marked exception that, with certain medications like SSRIs, I don't play around. I'm not going to like make it okay for you to take something that could be potentially dangerous on a physical level. But most of the time, it's not that way. Most of the time, I'll say like, look, the amount of damage that anxiety will cause in going into a ceremony is so much more than what eating a piece of chocolate cake or drinking a cup of coffee will do. So like if giving up the coffee or the cake is going to cause the anxiety, then don't give it up, but I always try to frame it in that reference to what you're willing to give up, and I think that as someone who is married, actually, it's a wonderful example, like of when you're willing to give up anything for another person, that is a demonstration of the depth of your care and love. And so if you can, like reflect upon that in terms of the healing process and how much do you care about the healing process, then almost naturally there will be a willingness to give up whatever it takes to achieve that healing.
Absolutely. And just, offering it as an invitation instead of like a rule or a requirement. I really like that. And as you said, apart from very few occasions, it is a very individual process, to determine what is good for a person, because what is good for one person, it might not be the best to another person. And this is so true. And that's one of the beauty of this medicine for me, that we are drinking literally the same medicine, like prepared by the same person in the same space, and we are all having completely different experience because we have our personal journey and our personal healing as well. So I love that you give this personal attention and just like judge each case on a personal basis, apart from these few exceptions that we mentioned. What about,
if I can add to that, because I think it's a brilliant time to maybe talk about that, but we come from a very materialist paradigm in the West, modern culture, and if you wanted to call it our science, is very material focused, is very material centric. Even when we talk about consciousness, we tend to talk about it like if you have a mental disorder, it's a chemical disorder. It's like I need to see the pieces. I need to hold something in my hand. I need to be able to like measure it and test it and see the consistency of it. It's very, very material based. Even in the understanding of consciousness, it is very material based, which to me is kind of humorous, but it's really our relationship, which is non-material, that determines whether something is harmful or beneficial for us. It is not the substance. If you drink coffee and it's a wonderful medicine for you because it's certainly a very powerful medicinal plant, then that's a healthy relationship. But if you have a dependency where if you don't drink a cup of coffee, you'll get sick or you'll get headaches or you'll suffer, then chances are you do not have a healthy relationship with that. It's not the coffee. It's not the substance. It's not the material. It's your relationship with it. There are plenty of people that drink alcohol, and alcohol is a whole category of medicines. They're all medicinal plant extracts. That's why we call them spirits. And if you have a good relationship with them, then they will help you. But there is a lot of people that have bad relationships with alcohol, and they are harmful. The difference isn't the alcohol. It's definitely your relationship to it. And that goes way beyond just medicines. But of course, it's the key ingredient to whether something is a drug or whether something is a medicine. The same exact substance, different relationship. And so how we relate is what we should be focusing on, in my opinion. How we relate to what we're ingesting, how we relate in every aspect of our lives. And to me, the Shipibo tradition recognizes that and focuses on that. And a plant dieta is a perfect example of how it emphasizes the importance of our relationship rather than the substance itself. And that's why ayahuasca ceremonies produce such a wide spectrum of personal experiences, because everyone relates to the medicine in their own unique way. And if we focus on the relationship, then I think that we gain the most ability to affect change for the positive, for our own benefit, than if we focus on the substance. But we in the West don't, it's hard for us to think that way. You know, even if you see headlines on scientific research about ayahuasca, it'll almost always say ayahuasca does this. Like ayahuasca grows new brain cells. That was the headline I just read this year. And you know, it just ignores the relationship.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. I so resonate with it. But I think, you know, that is the problem, you know, in the West, that we have this disconnection from our spiritual nature and the spiritual aspect of reality, you know, and even people who might be religious, they not necessarily getting this aspect, you know what I'm saying? So obviously, this for me is like, as you said, relating, but so within, so without, so really is about our relationship to ourselves first and foremost. That's what I learned through the medicine, and how was that mirrored in, you know, addictions or whatever, you know, what I like, that is mirroring my relationship with myself. And what the medicine helped me to understand and to do is that healing that primary relationship to myself, and really becoming aware how badly I treated myself, you know, inside of me. And that was this war within me. And to come back, you know, to love and compassion, and to integrate myself and repair my primary relationship with myself and all aspects of myself. And then, you know, that what created the difference in my life, you know, that internal process. And that happened in the integration, that embodiment, even though I had understandings and insights, obviously, and experience through my journeys in the ceremonies. But it took time, you know, to actually put that into practice, you know, and to stop the self-sabotage and the self-sacrifice, you know, and to empty and let go of those things that I was carrying and I was not even aware of it, and that I was holding. So how do you like support people, you know, once they leave the retreat, and how do you stay in touch with them? Do you connect with them, somebody? Are there people who are returning to you on a regular basis? Yeah, what is your experience about, you know, what we talked about, the after, what happened?
Sure. You know, we don't have that many return participants. Maybe I would say less than 5% of participants return. There are
I think
some.
that's a compliment, you know, because I think, you know, you don't, if you healed, you don't need more medicine in a way, you know, that's kind of like a compliment in a way. I see that I really received through the medicine that you are the healer and love is the medicine. And, you know, everything is just helping us to remember that. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, our goal really is to provide a transformative experience that won't require a return, which also kind of goes against the modern medical paradigm, which really looks at a patient as a customer. But in terms of aftercare, I also set up a counseling session that's included in the price of our retreats. as an integration counseling session. And then I'm an integration counselor. So, anytime that someone wants to set up a session with me, I'm available. But we now have kind of a network of counselors. And like you spoke with Dean, who worked for the Ayahuasca Foundation for 9 years. He is available. Some of our other facilitators that worked with us for a number of years have their own counseling services or their own practices that they offer. And so we have those as references. I might not be the best fit for someone, but they might find some really great results working with someone else from our organization. We do keep our references in the organization, or at least people that I know and work with personally. I feel that's beneficial because if someone comes out of a retreat from our organization and they speak to someone that was a facilitator in our organization, whatever their story is, the facilitator knows like exactly what they're talking about, because they know what dieta they did. They've done that dieta too. Like they know what treatment they did. They've done those treatments too. They've administered those treatments. So they really know the specifics of the retreat. Whereas if they were to go to maybe an integration counselor that isn't specifically familiar with how we operate in our tradition, then there would probably be some level of explanation, which might lend itself to a loss of understanding completely about what the person is referring to. So we do have like a network of integration counseling and practicing, as well as like a really wonderful community. We've had, over 1,500 people visit our center and over 600 people do our courses. So there are communities all over the world of ceremonies, healing, treatments, and counseling that services that can be attained or connected wherever a person may be after doing a retreat. So that's something that has developed like in a really wonderful way.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. I agree, that the best is if you can offer integration support as well, because obviously, specific to the experience and to the place and so on and so forth. But I would like to share this, and I would like to hear your take on this, that I receive quite a bit of people who come to me after they've been through a retreat or something, and they come across with my book or my content or podcast or whatever, and they realize that they need integration because they don't feel good, but they never even heard about it. You know what I mean? Like, you are educating people about this part, but unfortunately there is a lot of retreats and centers who are just don't even talk about what happens. It's like, okay, goodbye, go home, thank you for your participation, good luck with everything. This is real. And I found that even though, as you say, everybody has a very individual journey, but I found that there is a common journey in all the integration, and that's what I was writing about the book, this framework that it's kind of going through a death and rebirth cycle, or the medicine wheel, or however, whatever map you want to use it. I feel that people go through that experience in their own way, but there are these kind of milestones of you going into the dark night of the soul. There is trauma, there's this that's coming up, you integrating. That there are several kind of milestones that I observed that everybody went through it who was consciously, doing this integration process. What is your take on this?
I can't say that I feel that everyone's process could be like put into certain categories. I don't try to do that, I guess. So I'm not trying to identify like what you might have just called milestones. I really just kind of listen to what they're talking about. I would say that I focus entirely on consciousness. I mean, honestly, I'm a monistic idealist in the sense that I don't believe anything exists other than consciousness. So clearly that means that I focus on consciousness because there is nothing but consciousness in my perspective. And so, that to me is where all of the healing takes place, obviously. I look at what I consider to be personal truths and the value of those personal truths And I look at the healing process as the transformation of personal truths from detrimental to beneficial. And so my integration counseling focuses a lot on the continuation of that transformation. Also, like, it's a lot of memory exercises where I encourage like the fractalization or the expansion of those beneficial memories of personal truths, and that so that they increase their influence on our responses and interpretations to future experiences. And I guess that would be really like what I would sum up in my view of the integration process, is really like increasing the number of memories that serve as influences to my responses and interpretations of future experiences. That's the first time I've said that. That was really a super summed up way of saying it. In terms of the healing itself, I would say that very similar thing. I would say that the healing itself is a transformation of detrimental truths into beneficial truths, and that it is achieved through an expansion of awareness, more specifically through the amplification of sensory perceptive ability that comes from the plant medicine tradition itself as a consciousness enhancement mechanism to surround and nurture the substance that also contributes to that sensory amplification. And that's how I view like what psychedelic therapy is, or more specifically what ayahuasca assisted therapy is.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your perspective. I have another question. I'm taking advantage that I'm talking to you here right now. So I want to mention what is really coming up in the medicine circles now. And this is, that some of the space holders and shamans and healers and retreat leaders, the whole topic with the sexual abuse of women in these spaces, in these medicinal spaces. So I would like to ask you, does this affect your place, that this is going on now in these circles? Like, do you have anything to say about it? And how do you create a safe place for people, from this perspective?
Well, unfortunately, it's been going on forever. And it's not just because of the industry of ayahuasca tourism. And it's not even just with plant medicine tourism. I mean, it's basically everywhere. If you look into yoga, you'll see the scandals and the controversies. If you look into meditation, if you look into religion, of course, those are the most obvious cases. And then again, if you look into the corporate world, anytime that there is a power hierarchy, you're probably going to see exploitation, and sexual exploitation will certainly be at the top of the types of exploitation that you see. A lot of it, to me, is being addressed, and I think it's being addressed really well. About educating participants. First of all, I think that there's a triple challenge when you're talking about the ayahuasca industry or the ayahuasca tourism industry, because one, just there's a cross culture. And so, for the Shipibo, for example, there's anthropological studies that show that, the way that Shipibo men and women interact is so very distinct than the way that, for example, American men and women interact. For a woman in American society to give a man a hug doesn't usually mean that much. You could easily give a man a hug because you're happy to see them that day. They're like a friend of yours. It doesn't mean that you have strong feelings for them, that you want to have intimate relations with them. Those meanings aren't directly implied by the hug itself, even though even within our culture, like the type of hug, there's still the potential for mixed messaging to happen in those instances. But in Shipibo culture, a hug is like very sexual. A hug is like a very intimate interaction that men and women don't share on a friendly basis. And I think a kind of an example is maybe hand holding, like we look at hand holding as if it's very innocent in our culture, but yet how often do you hold a man's hand? You know, like how I don't hold a woman's hand, you know, but yet we think of it as innocent, but yet we actually also recognize that there's probably something that does get, you know, communicated in that gesture. And so, you know, that element of the cross culture, and then, you know, that is like opening up a giant can of worms, really, because whose culture is right? You know, like whose culture should we follow? And am I, as a white person from America, gonna go down to a different country and tell some people of a different race and a different culture how they should have their culture? You know, like I don't think so. So, you know, that element is like makes things very complex. Then the second element is that spiritual element where, you know, like we're a materialist paradigm. We're the modern world is very material. So we don't understand consciousness, and we definitely don't understand spirit, because those are non-material realms. And we really focus so much of our attention, if not all, on the physical realms, the material realms, even to the point, like I mentioned, like where consciousness is a collection of chemical experiences. You know, like we want to look, we treat mental illness with chemicals, and not successfully. So when we do come into contact with spirituality, or more so with a spiritual person, then we really don't know what that means. It's so mysterious to us that there's this idea that we just make all these assumptions, you know, like, oh, if I have decided in my mind that you're a spiritual person, that goes along with you're a moral person according to my morals. You're an ethical person according to my ethics. There's a set of behaviors that you will follow according to how I dictate that set of behaviors. You know, there are all these kind of like assumptions that we just imply, and then oftentimes impose with great trust that that is the way that it is. And unfortunately, that creates what could be a potentially dangerous vulnerability. Now we're saying, well, that person would never do that. I've decided already they're a spiritual person, and along with spirituality comes all these things. And then that's like the classic case where you have your religious leader, your priest, your minister, or whatever. You look at them as if they are the epitome of moral ethics and code, even within our culture where there's an agreement about what those ethics and morals are. And then they misbehave, they act outside of that, and you have this kind of willingness or whatever it is, but you like go along with it, and then only later do you realize, fuck, that was totally messed up, you know. And so there's better education, I would say, happening now through a lot of communications, just like you and I talking, but there's literature about it, and there's a lot more discussion about it. There's websites about it, you know, there's forums. So I would say that there's a lot more education that tries to prevent the, I'll call it like the guruization of curanderos. And then also just to understand like that, hey, there's what you're comfortable with and what your boundaries are always valid, and always, you know, deserving of your own decisions to step up, step back, or do, you know, act accordingly. And then there is the consequence for the other people, you know. So then you have like what happens to a curandero should they act in that way. And, you know, those are the consequences. I honestly don't think that consequences are the primary reason why a person behaves the way they do or don't. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't see so much misbehavior. But that is another contributing factor, that with the internet, you know, if a curandero like does something that goes against the appropriate behavior, then it's like, you know, it's out there, it goes viral, you know, like 100,000 people know about it the next day. And so, you know, that element for sure. I do think does contribute. And then there is a movement also, for equal rights, to have that understanding, to treat people equally. I do think that the United States is way ahead of a lot of other countries, specifically the countries where ayahuasca originates. They're still, coming along, I guess you could say, in that. But even me just saying that, I don't know, like you could easily just said, just accuse me of racism right now because I said that, oh, the brown people are coming along, eventually they'll get to as far as the white people, like, I don't know. It's a challenging time, to say the least. And then, that third component, which is kind of like the second one, but the third one is that personal relationship. And then there is a fantasy. I know from personal observation that there are times when someone has a fantasy about being partnered with someone they look up to. I guess maybe in our culture in the US, it would be like a groupie mindset where, you go to the concert and you've like fallen in love with this person that you don't know. You've only witnessed them on stage performing, but you felt so moved by their performance that you want to have some deeper, intimate connection with them. And then later, realize that you're very regretful. And that's like a two-way street, I would say, because the curanderos are almost like thrown into this weird form of fame that they don't know. And then they're thrown in a form of fame where the messaging is so different than their own culture. And, I'm not trying to make excuses for anyone really, but there's clearly a lot of complexity involved. And so I would say that the industry itself, because it is a combination of cultures, because there's this mixture of a lot of North American and European cultures with the South American cultures, there's an education in the staff of all of the centers themselves. And then there's also this education in the participants that go to those centers about learning that. So, I mean, I've been in this for 15 years, and I would say that I do feel like it's gotten much, much better in terms of having some sort of self-regulation.
Yes, thank you for offering this very extensive different perspectives, because I totally agree that this is so complex, and there are so many angles, and definitely steps are being made, in terms of improving the situation. And I just want to point out to our listeners that what you mentioned just in a couple of points, that obviously educate yourself, investigate before you go to a retreat, like listen to podcasts like this, listen to people, and then talk to people who participated, like normal places. I'm sure if somebody calls you and say, can you give me a reference that I can talk to who did your program, you will give, because I always offer references to my clients to talk to my ex-clients who went through the training, and if they wish to speak to somebody. So speak to a real person who was there and did experience it. Check out the place, do your educate yourself and do your work and do your research. And then as you said, there is a part, is that is intuition as well, that your common sense and expectations, so on and so forth. So I think that that's also comes into it, and I always say to people what we already mentioned, your intention. If you have a strong intention, that you are doing this for the highest purpose of healing and awakening and being in service to yourself and to the world, you will be guided, into places with integrity and authenticity. And so there is a couple of things that people can do, and I so resonate with, bridging different cultures, because I feel that in terms of the integration as well, this is the main problem for the Westerners, that they go there, they immersed into this very different world. You just described one of the retreats. Wow, you know, nothing that other people heard about, like no part of it they can relate. And then after this transform, as you said, radically transformational experience, they go back into their old environment that doesn't even have the understanding to hold context for this experience. And that creates, you know, a lot of fear, anxiety, and just things of what's going on here. So I feel I'm always a forever student, and this is part of the global integration, right? We have integration within ourselves or parts, and integration as a human family, you know, and creating these bridges and listening to each other and understanding each other, and bringing those things together so we can all bring our gifts and offer our best, you know, into that contribution, and create a new standard, you know, for this, as you said. So it will be a natural process for people to weed out kind of people with no integrity, because there will be a standard that people
Right.
will be aware of and they will follow, and it will be created, and we are the ones creating it in a way, you know, that the
Right.
people who went there and crossed the cultures and trying to bring these things together. Does that make sense? I'm sure that it makes sense to you.
Well, I think that to try to sum that up too, like what the point that you were making, you know, that intuition, you want to have informed intuition, and how you can create that informed intuition is by getting as much information as you can about the place that feels the best to you. So, you know, most of people that are trying to figure out like what to do or where to go, if they have decided that they think ayahuasca is the right path for them to take, go to the internet. And so if you go to the internet and you see a website that feels like that's the place you want to go to, then reach out to them, you know, have direct communication, maybe even try to set up a call so that you can have more information through that call that can inform your intuition even further. And if you get a bad feeling about it, then trust that your intuition is accurate, and act upon it, you know, act accordingly. I would say that there's probably like a common theme when there is some type of situation where there is a bad feeling, but then oftentimes our mind like tries to rationalize out of it. Yeah, like, you know, and I got this bad feeling, but then I thought, you know, and like, then I thought, oh no, that doesn't make sense, you know, like where we kind of think ourselves away from our intuition. And so, you know, I think a big part of what I try to do, especially like with the empowerment course, and it sounds a lot like what you're describing when you say like you are the healer and the healing is love, or the medicine is love. We have a lot more information accessible to us. We have a lot more sense organs in our body than we name typically. You know, we just have the like 5 names of our senses, but we have way more than that. And we kind of group them all in this weird word intuition instead of like specifying them more specifically. But like all of our organs speak to us, they process information, they take in information about what's going on inside of us as well as what's going on outside of us. And it's just that we tend not to listen as well to those, and probably because we don't recognize them as well. It's a strange phenomenon that I bring up a lot, where as human beings, we, one, tend to think that we're not part of nature, which is totally ridiculous. But two, that we recognize instinct as this kind of marvelous phenomenon in every being but ourselves. Like we don't really acknowledge our own instinct, but yet we can answer the question of how animals know to do certain things with instinct very easily. You know, we acknowledge its existence. We are not in denial of instinct as a concept or a phenomenon that is observable, only if you're talking about our own instinct. And so the revival of instinct, which, to me is the revival of a connection, allowing us to receive and understand messaging from a greater whole, that to me is like a big part of the healing process. And in that sense, like, we are our own healers because we have the ability to revive that instinct. And through that instinct and the trust of our intuition, we can guide ourselves down the path that's meant for us.
Absolutely. I resonate with this. I feel that what I went through and witnessed many people who walk, the same path, is this just really coming back into this internal guidance and this type of sovereignty, and not relying on the external world in order to know what your next step is or how to proceed. And obviously, when you rely on the external, is a constant anxiety because there is so many point of views and opposing contrast. And once you tune in and connect to that voice, there is one voice. So it's such a relief. Maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense at the beginning, but once you start acting upon it, it all will make sense. That is my experience. I'm so grateful for this conversation today, and I definitely want to continue. I think we can talk for many hours and go into many areas and on this topic. And yeah, I just appreciate that we made this connection and we're sharing this conversation with the world and with our audience. So just to wrap up our talk today, is there something that you would like to communicate out to the world in this moment that you feel you want to bring across and emphasize?
Well, I would go back to that comment about relationship. To me, that is really the key to all of our lives. What determines our satisfaction, our level of fulfillment. It's not in the material realm, and it's everything to do with our relationships. And that should be the focus of our attention. And how we respond to our experiences is far more important than the experience. That's like a perfect example. Like we have a memory of all of the experiences in our past, but that memory is really the memory of how we interpreted our response to the experience. So, whether you remember the first time you rode a roller coaster ride as like terrifying experience or a thrilling experience, has nothing to do with the roller coaster, and everything to do with how you responded and interpreted and remembered your experience. And I think once you recognize that those are the most important elements, then you can enable yourself to be empowered. You have so much more power because it's not about what happens to you or what happened to you in the past. It's about what you did, responding, interpreting, and remembering the experience. And that is, to me, very, very powerful, because that enables me to go back. And yeah, I can't change what happened to me, but I can change how I interpret what happened to me. And in doing so, I will change how I remembered what happened to me. And that memory is the reality. My reality isn't what happened to me. My reality is how I remember what happened to me. And I can change how I remember what happened to me. That means that I can change something from a trauma to a lesson. That means I can change something that I regret to what I am grateful for. That means that I have the ultimate power to determine what my reality is. And as I change my interpretations from the past, I ultimately change my responses in the future. And my ability to respond is my true superpower. If we focus on our ability to respond, then we will truly understand what it means to take responsibility.
Wow. Thank you so much. This was like such beautifully wrapped up, and I was just making some notes, but yeah, you said it so well. I often say to people I work with that you can gauge your integration process looking at your life and see how did your relationships change. Did your relationship with other people, to things, to yourself, to your behavior, whatever it is, and gauge if you are still feeling the same and in the same relationships, or it is changing, because that is a primary indicator, as you said, to that healing and that integration and that awakening and evolution that we are all going through, some people faster than others. And yeah, responsibility, a lot of people find this word, you know, a trigger word, but I love it. And especially that definition that you gave, the ability to respond, because this implies freedom from me. And as you said, we are trapped, you know, in reaction, which is just reacting, you know, unconsciously, like a robot or a zombie. So there is no freedom there. So responsibility is a very positive word for me, because it involves that freedom that, as you said, I can choose how do I respond. I can choose how do I remember things, how do I interpret things. I can choose to change my mind, to shift my perspective, to shift my reality, and then my reality shifts. And that is something that is truly, you know, liberating and empowering. So thank you for that reminder. And for our audience, thank you for listening. It's a little bit long, but I hope that you enjoy this conversation and you get a lot of good things out of it. And yeah, just remember that you are the healer, love is the medicine. And check out the description where we're gonna provide all the links to Carlos's websites and offerings and all the other details. And see you soon. Sending you oceans of love. Thank you. Love you.